The good news is we're all in this together. And when we see we're together, we can work things out. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and the famous Laurie Cartwright. The fabulous Laurie Cartwright.
Goodness, thank you, George.
Well, I always introduce Tom as the famous Tom Fennell, but you're the fabulous Laurie Cartwright, or the famous, both. You know, everybody around here knows Laurie Cartwright. She was you were on the Board of Education for years.
I was on the school board for the town of Brattleboro and then for Brattleboro Union High School. Combined 11 years.
11 years. This is a famous local leader. Okay, this is Energy Week, and I should tell you how it comes about. Every day I get up early and do my energy blog, which is called geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. And I find news relating to energy and climate change, and everything that I find that I think is interesting, I put into a 50 or 55 word synopsis with a link to the original article. 10 to 15 of those get packaged together every week in a blog posting, and the posting goes up every day. And I've done that for over 6 years now, every day, no exceptions, every single day. So I've put up over 27,000 links to articles. And when I am at a point on Wednesday morning, I put together the stories for this show. I picked the as Tom would say, the best of the blog, and it goes up to be able to tell the audience, how it's gone in the last week. So we'll keep you apprised of the dates and the links, and you can go to the blog geoharvey.com to read whatever, if we tell about a story that you find interesting, you can read it in depth by going there, and if you click on a date on the calendar, it'll take you to the blog posting for that day. So you have at most 15 articles to look through to find the one you want. So our first article comes from Clean Technica, and it has a picture, by the way. There you go.
Let's do our magic.
Yeah, let's do our magic. Laurie is in charge of the pictures and the titles.
Scotland hits annual GHG emissions target third year running.
Third year running. Scotland's climate change secretary announced that the country had met its statutory annual greenhouse gas emissions target for the third straight year in 2016, and this resulted in emissions being down 49% on the 1990 baseline of European countries. Only Sweden, with a drop of 51%, reduced emissions faster than Scotland. How about that?
That's fabulous.
Isn't it?
Those Scots.
Well, a large part of this, I think, is it's not simply a matter of wanting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also, they have known for a long time that they're far better off if they're energy independent, and if they go to renewable power, they're going to go to cheaper electricity. So, I mean, especially when you compare the cost of wind power or solar power, batteries, that sort of thing, with nuclear power, it's a huge difference. So,
especially if the Scottish government is not subsidizing the nuclear industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you know it, but there was a nuclear meltdown in Scotland.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe we should go back to a picture of us.
Okay. Well, I like the picture that it is a picture of wind.
Isn't that nice?
It is.
Yeah, pretty picture. So our next item comes from Smart Cities World.
Blockchain renewable energy pilot.
Now, this is about a company called Switch, which is SWYTCH. Switch blockchain-based clean energy initiative and the energy to market. a German company aggregating energy trading in Europe announced a blockchain renewable energy trial that would power about 500,000 homes. This is not a small pilot project.
No, it's not.
The pilot program in Germany includes approximately 3.5 gigawatts of solar, wind, hydro, and biogas energy capacity. Should I explain what blockchain is?
Well, to be honest, I didn't recognize the term.
Okay.
I'm not as
Viewers probably
well informed as I'd like to be, so.
Very often don't know what these things are. Blockchain is a computational method, if you'd like. When you create a record, you create the record and you create the information about it and you make it public, or you produce it in an environment where it can be reproduced elsewhere. So the record exists, but it also goes to other computers. And then if you produce a record of a sale of electricity and there's a residual right to that, which can be traded, when one of those gets traded, the chain is updated or not elsewhere, but the most recent one is going to have that update, and that most recent one is also available. And the result of this is you get older records which don't have the latest information, but the latest information is all over the place. It's almost impossible to change that information. And if anybody really wants to know what's going on, they can find out by looking at that. And if they find two records that differ, so one of them says it went to one person and another one says it went to another, now you've got a situation where you've got to investigate what went wrong. Anyway, this is a very secure system because if anybody wants to hack this, they have to hack everything. And you can't really do that all that easily. So the result of that is that if you want to produce, a gigawatt hour of electricity from the solar panels in your backyard, and you have some sort of right, that can be created in a blockchain, that can be made a record that's available, that record can be traded. Nobody has to worry about somebody fudging the books. And the result of this is the whole system is much more secure, so you could buy electricity in one state, sell it in another, and people can be confident that things are actually working. So it's become extremely valuable in the sale of renewable energy. And I'm sorry I went on so long.
No, it's very good to know.
Okay, our next item is from Business Leader.
The U.S. has added more solar power than any other type of electricity in 2018 so far. More evidence of an energy revolution.
Yes. By the way, this article, you have to keep in mind that the U.S. DOE office called the Energy Information Administration says that there's a lot of natural gas generating capacity which is going to be brought online this year. And they're expecting more natural gas than renewables to be put online this year for the first time since 2013. But we'll see how that happens. The EIA is notoriously bad in making projections. They're comical, they're so bad. Because what they do is every year they take the additions that are coming on for solar, for wind, for whatever, and they say it's been exponential in the past, but in the next 18 years, in 18 months, it's going to level off. So they show a 25-year projection, which is basically identical to what it is 18 months from now.
Okay.
And every year they have to up that projection because it's been exponential in the meantime. And so if you graph this and you see the graph, it starts out exponentially like this and it goes up exponentially. But for every year they show this thing, and it's like a ladder of rungs going off to the with their projections. They are just laughably bad, and they know it. They've admitted it.
Well, at least they admit it.
Yeah, they're trying to get better, but oh well. Okay.
Well, we should
go on. Oh, I should
Definitely.
read this, shouldn't I? U.S. added more solar capacity than any other type in the first quarter of 2018. A report from the nonprofit Solar Energy Industries Association said the U.S. solar market added 2.5 gigawatts of new capacity in the first quarter, up 13% from the first quarter of 2017. That accounts for 55% of all new U.S. electric capacity for the quarter. And, you know, we don't know where this is going to go in the future. The market in the United States has been rendered very complicated by tariffs and changing costs, and it just goes on and on and on. Policy. Yeah, but the market is in transition. Okay, we're up to Friday, June 15th, and I should have said, but didn't, those first three were Thursday, June 14th. And we have an article from the National Resources Defense Council.
And a slide.
And a slide? No, the slide is after this.
Oh, okay.
I think. Got a title?
It was hard to see where that was supposed to go. I think that's the slide that goes with this article.
The slide, oh, you know what? I might have, let me put the slide up. Yes, I'm sorry. Laurie, I put this in the wrong order. You were right, I was wrong. There it is.
That probably won't happen again, so.
No, it'll happen.
Well, maybe this will be my last week. The National Resource Defense Council and 18 other groups challenge the European Union's mistaken climate decision.
EU policymakers agreed on a new renewable energy directive that failed to fix Europe's broken bioenergy policies. The decision to continue to label the indiscriminate burning of wood as carbon neutral undercuts the EU's climate targets. Now, that's what the forests that have been clear-cut look like. Actually, this is probably one of the better ones, because the ones that are bad, it's just dirt as far as the eye can see. And what happened was the UK, for example, at the Drax station, they wanted to stop burning coal. So they converted Drax to burn wood. And what's happening is the forests in places like Georgia are being clear-cut, pelletized, and shipped to Europe. And when they did this, they promised Georgia that they would only use forest waste.
Georgia, the state or the country?
The state. And of course, they aren't using only forest waste, they're cutting down forests to get this. Now, the big problem of this is, the concept is the trees grab the carbon out of the air, the power plant puts it back into the air. It's carbon neutral because it just goes around. The problem is, the trees are one of the best carbon sinks we've got. And so, using forest waste is probably not bad. Even using sustainable forestry is probably not bad. But doing what they're doing, where they're clear-cutting forests and burning them, is not helping the situation.
No, it's not.
I'm not even sure that it isn't worse than burning coal.
Well,
I could see it.
Splitting hairs, which is worse, but it's good that
they're aware of it.
They're changing it.
Yes. Should we go on?
Sure.
We have an item from Yahoo News UK.
Volkswagen was fined €1 billion for diesel emission scandal.
Volkswagen's diesel emission scandal is still ongoing, with the German prosecutors fining the automaker €1 billion, which is about $1.16 billion, for cheating. The €1 billion fine is one of the highest ever imposed by German authorities against a company, according to Reuters. But things are not slowing down for VW.
They have a very loyal consumer base, I believe. I know a lot of people who really like the product, and they were shocked and disappointed when that happened, but they're still buying Volkswagens. Well, I guess they figure now that they got caught, they'll stop doing that.
Well, there's a bunch of things about this that are, I don't know. One of the things was that one of the people in the United States who was commenting on this, one of the people at the EPA said all of the auto companies were doing the same kind of cheating. It's just that the other ones got caught, and
Not get
VW
caught.
did not. And you know, the thing is, VW had a very sneaky way of dealing with this, and the way that they dealt with it was, if the car sensed that the steering wheel had not been turned at all over a period of about 30 seconds, it would keep the emissions system under control. But if there was any turning going on, it would simply bypass it. And that meant that when you were testing it in a lab, you'd get the emissions testing with the emissions controls. But if it was out on the road, you wouldn't get the emissions controls, and that way your car was much peppier. And that is just plain wrong. I mean, there may be people who think that's okay, but they're possibly the same people who think that greed is good.
Possibly. Quite possibly. I think you're onto something, George.
Okay.
And I won't say anything about immigration.
We were talking about immigration earlier, and I don't mind saying anything about immigration.
Wasn't really a segue.
No.
But
Okay.
next,
Our
Clean
next-
Technica.
Yeah, our next item is from Clean Technica, still June 15th. Go ahead, Laura.
1.6 trillion. Trying to see. Oh, George knows I'm not wearing my glasses, so it's harder
Nobody else
for me
will
to
notice.
see. It's harder for me to see that that's 1.6
Trillion.
trillion dollar
Yes.
natural gas expansion will eliminate any chance of meeting Paris carbon goals.
An upcoming meeting of the G20 countries, at an upcoming meeting, one of the topics on the agenda will be increasing natural gas production investments by as much as $1.6 trillion by 2030. A report by Oil Change International finds doing so will use up the entire remaining carbon budget limits needed to meet climate goals of the Paris Climate Accords. And of course, what they're trying to do is this thing of replacing coal with natural gas. And it's not going to, it will do some things that they want. It'll stop coal plants from emitting soot, but that's not the problem.
No, why aren't they investing in renewables
They will.
and promoting renewables?
And we can tell them why.
In lieu of natural gas, because natural gas is not sustainable.
Not only is natural gas
not
not
green.
sustainable, it's not as inexpensive as renewables. And we will see that
That
as we
gets
go on.
people's attention.
Yes. Unfortunately, the world is full of people who think greed is good, and you don't do anything for any reason aside from greed. Okay, we are up to Saturday, June 16th, and we have a picture.
Yay. I like this one.
You like this one?
This week's pictures are much better than last week's
Well,
pictures
last
as
week's-
far as cheer factor.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, this is from Commonwealth Magazine. Got a title?
Well, I want to make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, great. Putting a price on carbon gains momentum in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts moved closer to embracing an economy-wide price on carbon as the Senate approved an energy bill with a market-based compliance mechanism that, in quotes, one of the New England's largest utilities backed the move, saying a carbon price is needed for the region to have a chance of meeting its greenhouse gas emission targets. And it's nice to see utilities backing these moves.
Yes.
Now, we, of course, here in Vermont are kind of blessed, I think, with a utility which is led by Mary Powell, who really is brilliant when it comes to what she says she's doing is creating a new business model. And actually, that's what we need, exactly that, a new business model.
Maybe Massachusetts is taking notes.
Well, I have no doubt that they are. I mean, Mary Powell has been invited to across the country to receive awards for the work she's doing, and she describes the current state of technology as sticks and strings, which is the telephone or the electric poles and the lines running between them.
Oh my goodness.
She's got what I think is, I mean, clearly she's interested in making money, but she's got her eye on things that go beyond that.
With respect to renewables versus
Yes, absolutely.
fossils?
No question
Good.
about that. So
I knew that's what you meant, but I wanted to make sure our audience knew.
Yeah.
Despite tariffs, okay, we're back.
Yes, we are.
Despite tariffs, solar energy is cheaper than ever.
There you go.
Woo!
This is from the Weather Channel.
Oh my goodness.
Clearly a biased operation. The cost of solar power continues to fall with two new lows in the United States, even as tariffs are imposed in favor of keeping the coal and natural gas industries afloat. One expert pointed out that it is cheaper to build a new PV plant than just to operate an existing coal or natural gas plant. So, you know, what we were talking about just a minute ago, this is what's happening is these costs are going down, and they're just going to keep going down. We can bet on that because of Wright's law, which we've discussed before, which is a standard law of economics that says the more you do something, the better you get at it. And so you get more efficient at making solar panels. The cost of solar panels goes down. You can bet that's going to happen as long as they get turned out like BBs from factories. The problem is they're being turned out like BBs from factories in China, not from factories in the United States. And the tariffs have really not, they've induced some Chinese companies, for example, to build factories in the United States.
Oh.
But that whole thing is very complicated. The United States imposed a, what was it, a 30% tariff?
30%.
The Chinese
Or
answered that
35.
with a tariff against American goods. So the United States is upping their tariff by 25%. But here's the problem. The United States imposes a tariff on China. What's the first thing the Chinese do? Everybody missed this, so you don't have to move your eyes around wondering where it is.
They increased production?
They decreased the amount of solar going up in China. And what does that do? Well, they had to decrease it because they were having problems with transmission lines being overburdened. But okay, that means that the cost of solar panels declines in China, because the United States has produced a tariff, and all of a sudden those solar panels have got much more appeal in the rest of the world. So China is going to countries in Africa and saying, you want solar panels? We'll loan you the money to put them in.
Oh my goodness.
And by the way,
that's great.
If you default, we'll just take a port. And we'll use that, you know, as a commercial port, military port, whatever. And they've already done that. And they are increasing their military presence literally all over the world, while the Trump administration is absolutely acting like it's ignorant.
Oh my gosh. Acting like it's ignorant.
Yeah, acting like it's ignorant? Do you think maybe it is ignorant?
Maybe they're not acting.
The Chinese have already made military agreements with the Dominican Republic and Dominica, both of which are barely off our shores.
Well,
this is called making China great again.
This is not where you were going with this story, but I didn't want the irony to be lost.
Yes.
That China had to decrease the amount of solar installations because the transmission lines couldn't handle the amount of energy that was being produced via the solar
and wind.
And wind.
Yeah,
and
both.
So
they've had that problem for years.
That's
and
a terrible problem to have.
Yes, and they have been dealing with that problem by a couple of years ago, they did the same thing with wind turbines. They said you're going to have to stop putting in wind turbines until we've got more transmission lines. And the reason was because too many had gone in and they were not being used. And they, you know, so they're doing a huge overhaul, and
playing catch up.
They're playing catch up, and you know, that's one of the effects.
This is great.
Should we move on?
Yes.
It's just an article from Clean Technica.
This is funny.
I'm glad you think it's funny.
I wondered if you selected this
Because of the company's name?
to get the co-host to chuckle.
No, I didn't, actually.
Okay.
If I'd thought about it, I would have.
I didn't know if you were trying to bring more humor into the show this
No.
week. I'm so serious sometimes.
Yes,
the
Laurie is too serious.
the lawyer in
Everybody,
me.
write her card, tell her she's too serious.
The lawyer in me. The Chicago Transit Authority selects the Boring Company for new high-speed route.
Yeah,
Or route.
that is the name of the company, the Boring Company.
The Boring Company, and it's even spelled boring.
That's right.
B-O-R-I-N-G, for those of you who are curious.
And by the way, do you know what this company is? Who is the leader of this company?
Obama?
Elon Musk.
I was going to say Chicago. I mean, there's other people from Chicago.
Yeah, but this is Elon Musk. This is Tesla. Okay? The Boring Company, what are they doing? They're boring holes underground.
That other kind of boring.
That other kind. Announced a project with the Chicago Transit Authority to develop a set of tunnels connecting Chicago's O'Hare Airport to downtown Chicago. The new route, the Chicago Express Loop, will get passengers from O'Hare to downtown in just 12 minutes for around $20 to $25, which is half the price of a cab.
Fabulous.
Isn't that something?
That's fabulous.
And you know, if you look in this story, which is at Clean Technica on June 16th, that's not the date it went into Clean Technica. That's the date, you'll find it on my blog if you click on the calendar. They have projects that they're working on all over the United States. And there you have it. Okay, we're up to Sunday, June 17th, and we have a picture and an item from the Florida Times-Union.
Oh my.
Oh my.
What are they up to down there?
What are they up to? Well, you'll notice there's funny smoke at the bottoms of those towers. Have you got a title?
Yes. Down and out. Implosion of cooling towers marks the end of the St. Johns River Power Park.
For a split second after the demolition plunger went down, the cooling towers at St. Johns River Power Park stood as if they would remain there for 30 more years as Jacksonville landmarks. Then the burst of 1,500 pounds of dynamite ripped through them, and they collapsed into dust. From the crowd, a child's voice called out, "Do it again."
Oh my goodness. Too bad you didn't have a sound clip for that one.
Well, yeah, and you know, I thought about this and I thought, maybe what they should do is find a couple more cooling towers they can demolish.
And somebody could be ready with a
We had
recorder.
that. Yeah, we had that story last week about the amount of our water that's going into thermal power plants, and it's, what was it, 37%?
Oh my goodness, it might have even been higher than that. It was a
huge amount of
number.
our water
Huge.
is going in, and of course these cooling towers are the flip side of that. What they're doing is cooling them with air. But the thermal plants are just, I mean, there's more disaster than you can shake a stick at when you consider these things. It's not just the carbon dioxide emissions. And we saw that with Vermont Yankee, where it was warming up the entire Connecticut River.
Yes.
And, you know, it's a problem.
Fish.
Hot fish. Fish have trouble in heat.
Yes, they do.
They really do. The water doesn't hold as much oxygen, and they burn up their food faster. Okay, should we go on?
Sure.
Okay. Our next item is from The Hill.
Okay. Well, we could go back to us and
Yeah,
not have to look at those
demolishing.
dreadful things. Harvard scientists. Trump environmental policies could result in 80,000 more deaths per decade.
Research by 2 Harvard University scientists concluded that the Trump administration's environmental policies could result in an additional 80,000 deaths per decade. The research, which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, examined the health impacts of the EPA's policies on toxic chemicals and air pollutants.
I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
This comes up over and over and over again. People
It
are
should.
dying because we're using fossil fuels, and it's not necessary anymore. There's no economic excuse for it
No,
anymore.
there's not.
We've seen that the battery backup I mean, one of the things that people don't realize is that battery backup of one kind or another, energy backup, has been required because of the fossil fuel and nuclear industries. And, you know, because the Vermont Yankee had to output the same amount of power 24/7, you needed to build a plant down the river that would store energy when it was produced, when the demand was below what Vermont Yankee was putting out, and produce energy when it was high, when the Vermont Yankee was not producing enough. And that plant, which is still going now that Vermont Yankee is gone, had a capacity which was double the capacity of Vermont Yankee itself.
I didn't realize that piece.
Yeah, huge.
Interesting.
Huge. And it was built at exactly the same time because Vermont
it
Yankee
knew.
was going in. So all of a sudden, we've got people saying, but solar and wind are not 24/7. Well, that's not the problem. The problem is more complicated than that. But nevertheless, battery storage is now cheaper than coal. Battery storage is now cheaper than nuclear. Why would you want coal or nuclear when battery storage is cheaper? And solar and wind are the cheapest energy sources we've got. You know, what the Trump administration is trying to do is keep nuclear power and coal power going so that the people who own those plants can continue to make money. That's the only excuse for it that I can see. And if that means that people are dying, well, there are legal terms for that, aren't there? Isn't it manslaughter?
Well, I don't think that the governmental officials are susceptible to that. They seem to be able to break a lot of laws, and
actually they're immune in a lot of
immoral
cases.
and unethical.
Yeah, and in many cases they're immune. You cannot prosecute the President of the United States while he's in office, but you can prosecute him when he's not in office. And you can remove him from office in certain ways, one of which is impeachment, another of which is going to the poll and voting for somebody else. And once
And
he's
we
out of
don't
office...
have to wait
No.
until the presidential election because we have the
Do
other
you
offices.
honestly think that Donald Trump would not be impeached if the Democrats took over the control of the House of Representatives? I cannot imagine that Donald Trump would fail to be impeached. And honestly, I've been a conservative all my life. You know, I voted twice for Richard Nixon. I voted for Gerald Ford. I voted for Ronald Reagan twice. I voted for George Bush twice. I voted for Bob Dole. I voted for George W. Bush. Once.
Well, I was going to say, I bet not twice.
And the reason I didn't vote for him the second time was very simple. It was because I could see very plainly that climate change was happening and that the Republicans in Washington were going into denial and that was going to cause a lot of damage, which it's doing, and it's getting worse. And, you know, okay, so you look at Bernie Sanders' presidential platform and you look at Theodore Roosevelt's presidential platform, they're almost identical. You know, the underlying principles in the two are absolutely the same. And there's no way Theodore Roosevelt would put up with the current administration.
No.
So you want to have a real, honest-to-goodness, patriotic American president? Well, you're not going to do it with Donald Trump, I don't think. I think that he's in it for himself and his buddies. And he's only buddies with people who are in it for him.
Fairly circular.
Fairly circular. Should we move on to
Oh my
Monday?
goodness, yes.
June 18th. I put up a new picture ahead of time. So.
Okay.
Oh, this is fun.
I should
This is absolutely fun.
should I select the picture?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
We can get it after this. This is from businessgreen.com.
Okay, great. Siemens pilots the use of ammonia for green energy storage.
This is Siemens, by the way.
Oh, Siemens.
Siemens.
Siemens
Siemens is
Simons.
a big company. It's big manufacturer. In a world first, Siemens is opening a 1.5 million pound project in Oxfordshire, employing ammonia as a form of energy storage. The proof of concept facility will turn electricity, water, and air into ammonia without releasing any carbon emissions. The ammonia can be stored and it can be burned for electricity, sold as a fuel, or sold for other industrial purposes. This is not the ammonia you buy when you go down to Brown and Roberts.
Ah.
That's ammonium hydroxide.
Okay.
Okay. It's the ammonia you smell when you open the bottle, because ammonia itself is a gas. But it's a marvelous gas. I mean, it's as crazy as water, and water is crazy. Ammonia, which is NH3, was actually used during the Second World War in Belgium, when the Nazis told the Belgians that they couldn't have gasoline to run their buses.
Oh.
They converted the buses to burn ammonia.
Oh my goodness.
Now that, honestly, I don't think is a very good idea for general use, at least not using their technology, because you're going to be putting out nitrous oxides if you do that. Nevertheless, with current technology, you can make that very clean. And that's what Siemens is trying to do. They're trying to test the idea of taking wind power, solar power, possibly biomethane from biodigesters, hydropower, you name it, and use that to make ammonia, which is then used for various purposes. Ammonia is also the thing that makes the magic, or part of the thing that makes the magic behind absorption refrigerators.
Oh.
Do you know about absorption refrigerators, Laurie?
Only peripherally.
Peripherally. How do you power an absorption refrigerator? Well, you can power it with propane. How do you get cool out of burning propane? And that was a science that was developed during the 19th century. And the person who produced the final steps that were required, Albert Einstein.
Oh my goodness.
And, you know, this is just one of the most fascinating things you can imagine. Ammonia is very special and fascinating stuff. I could go on for hours about it, but instead of doing that...
Well, I saw how you lit up when you saw that this was the next
This
story.
is cool. You know, this is,
Good.
you can store energy as ammonia. You can store it in a lot of different ways, but this is cool. We're going to have a story coming up which is cooler. But,
cooler?
Yeah, but our next thing is from Bloomberg, and this is...
This is good.
Yeah, this is good.
This is a feel-good story. Coal plants keep shutting despite Trump's order to rescue them.
Well, by golly, King Canute went down to the sea and ordered the tide not to come in. Did it make a difference? President Donald...
The emperor's new clothes.
Right. President Donald Trump ordered a rescue of the nation's struggling coal and nuclear power industries, but that does not mean utilities are reconsidering the shutdown of unprofitable plants. Many said Trump has not altered their plans to retire old units despite the prospect of his trying to force grid operators to buy power from the old plants. Donald Trump is not going to be president forever. The order that he comes up with is not going to will last forever. Even if it goes into effect at all, which it might not, and if it goes into effect, it might be that the Supreme Court would say, no, you can't do that, because it absolutely flies in the face of a free market. It flies in the face of the idea that you want small government. It flies in the face of the conservative principles that put those guys into their office, that is to say, the Supreme Court. I cannot imagine the Supreme Court would say, yes, there's a national emergency, and for that reason, despite the fact that FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, says, no, we don't need to, there's no emergency.
Well, just be careful.
Of?
Well, you said you can't imagine, and I know other things that we haven't imagined have come into fruition. So
Yes,
hopefully,
well, some things that we can't imagine come into fruition. But, you know, yeah.
I'm a downer. Sorry.
Sometimes you have to be.
Yes.
I mean, Adolf Hitler was elected. It actually happened.
Yes.
And we hope that we don't have to face the kinds of problems that he produced, which are
Right.
probably no more or less rational than what we're getting out of Washington right now. Should we
You
escape
said
from
it.
this?
You said it. Wow. We're having fun this
These
week.
opinions are my own, by the way.
Yes.
They have nothing to do
Brattleboro
with
Community Television. They probably already put that disclaimer up anyway.
Anyway, we have an item from the Denver Post.
Global warming cooks up a different world over 3 decades.
Yeah, we were warned. On June 23rd, 1988, a sultry day in Washington, D.C., Dr. James Hansen told Congress that global warming was approaching. It had not approaching, it had already arrived. 30 years later, it's clear that Hansen and other doomsayers were right, and the change has been sweeping. I want to point out the change has been sweeping. In Vermont, we've got Lyme disease. In Vermont, our maple syrup industry has been suffering, our skiing industry has been suffering, and the problem with this is we go out, it's still Vermont, okay? We see pretty much the same trees that we have always seen. The problem is everything seems to be under attack. Our maple trees are being attacked by invasive fungi. We've got emerald ash borers now in Vermont. We've got woolly adelgids, 2 different species. One of them attacks hemlocks, one of them attacks everything else but pine.
Oh my goodness.
Every other conifer. And the ones that attack, you know, if you think that, if you want to find out about woolly adelgids, just go online, go to a web search and do a search on adelgid and ghost forest. And you'll get pictures of entire forests that have been rendered into dead trees.
Oh my goodness.
And, you know, one of the pictures that comes to mind is beautiful rolling hills in fall colors, scarlet colors. Problem? Those rolling hills are Douglas firs. The scarlet fall colors are not in the fall, they're in the summer. And the reason they're there is because woolly adelgids have killed all the trees in the forest for miles and miles and miles across rolling hills. So, you know, what are we trying to do? We're trying to save a world that we, you know, something that is people can enjoy being in. That item, by the way, came from the Denver Post. We're up to Tuesday, June 19th, and we have a picture here. I'm sorry Tom Fennell wasn't here because I don't understand the apparatus under the stern of that ship. It looks like a huge number of tiny rudders and no propellers. But anyway, I think that may actually be what it is, an apparatus that propels the ship and is capable of moving it sideways and things like that. So this
We'll
is
have to check with him and get back to you next week.
this is from Clean Technica.
U.S. offshore wind upends plans for saving coal and nuclear power plants.
This was written by what's her name? Tina. I've forgotten. I'm not good with names. So anyway, sorry about that.
Tina Fey?
No, it's
I didn't think so.
the name Tina Clark comes into mind, but she's a kind of an activist in Massachusetts who didn't write this.
Okay.
Very fine young woman, but if the latest news out of the U.S. DOE is any indication, the Trump administration's newest stratagem for keeping old coal and nuclear power plants in operation, make the taxpayers pay extra to keep uneconomical power plants running, is going nowhere fast. And She's got, this may be worthwhile reading. It's on June 19th on the blog geoharvey.com. You have any comments on this?
Well, it's very good news, and thank goodness for U.S. offshore wind is all I can say.
Well, yeah.
And I know there's people who don't understand it, and I think they're scared of it. But
Offshore wind?
Hopefully the evidence in support of it will be...
The evidence in support of it is pretty well documented.
Put out into the public for them to learn.
In the course of the Cape Wind thing, Cape Wind, of course, has died, but it's been replaced by other things. The Massachusetts and Maine Audubon societies both came out in favor of Cape Wind.
Good.
And one of the most effective anti-wind organizations in the world is the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. And I remember one summer when they basically stopped $3.2 billion worth of offshore wind projects because they said that they would endanger birds because of the way they were sited. And that organization, when they wanted to get renewable power for their headquarters, put in a wind turbine.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so
What?
yeah, and
Had they retracted their opposition prior to that?
No, they were not objecting to wind power in general. They
just
were
the siting.
only objecting to the ones that they said the siting was poorly done.
Okay.
And they actually only oppose about 7% of the installations. Okay, we should move on. Power technology brought us our next thing.
Okay.
Maybe we should show ourselves. Oh, you're already on it.
I was going to say,
good for you.
I was going to say location when we were talking about this proper siting of the wind.
There you go.
National Grid unveils Northeast 80 by 50 pathway program.
Electricity and natural gas distributor National Grid released Northeast 80 by 50 pathway outlining various measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. The program includes in-depth modeling and analysis addressing the three most carbon-intensive sectors in the Northeast. This is the Northeast of the United States. Power generating, heating, and transportation. So they're talking about the whole bailiwick here. Everything's involved. And they want to reduce it 80% by 2050.
What part of the country, if they're talking about the Northeast, then they must be in the Northeast, but where are they? I don't recognize.
They operate in Massachusetts, but they're worldwide.
Okay.
When the name National Grid originated in the UK. And you read a lot about them in the UK.
Well, that makes sense because they've spelled program with two M's and an E.
That's right. And when I'm doing quotes,
yes,
I usually leave things as they appear. For the rest of it, I would change that and make it into something for Americans to read. Although my blog is getting to the point where almost half the people who go to it are from other countries. So anyway.
Well, I was curious to see that the three most carbon-intensive sectors in this part of the world anyway are power generation, heating, and transportation, because I know in other parts of the world, this country also, being part of the world,
yeah.
agricultural
is big.
It
often, really is big.
I think in general it's the top.
In many places it is the top, absolutely. But I think this pertains specifically to the Northeast. And unfortunately, believe it or not, there is a place in the Northeast called New England in a different country.
Okay.
In Australia, there's an area called New England, which is in the northeastern part of the country.
Interesting.
And it's nothing like the New England we know.
No, I don't think it would be.
Okay, we are up to State Impact, Pennsylvania.
And we have a
beautiful
slide.
Picture here. I just couldn't avoid putting that in. I went to get a picture because I needed one for that place in my blog, and I came across this at Wikimedia Commons, and I said, it's too good, just too good to pass it up.
I wonder where that is in Pennsylvania.
On the left side.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Changing species, flooding, wildfires among climate priorities on state land.
Pennsylvania conservation officials released a plan to confront climate change on public land as flooding, wildfires, and warmer bodies of water threaten wildlife, landscapes, and recreation. The state will identify the most resilient microclimates and then try to physically connect them by acquiring land or developing easements. Now, this is an interesting idea of, we want to produce quarters. If you find two microclimates that happen to be working, then put something between them so that there's something working between them. And that way you can just make bigger and bigger microclimates that function properly.
That is fabulous.
Isn't it?
I love that story.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to Wednesday, June 20th, and we have an item here from the Concord Monitor.
A lot of local news this week.
Yep.
Relatively local.
Relatively local.
Sununu vetoes energy bills. Republican senators seek an override.
New Hampshire Republican Governor Chris Sununu vetoed two energy-related bills that he said would have cost ratepayers about $110 million over 3 years. But key members of his party are bristling at the move, calling one bill a vital lifeline for the biomass and timber industry, and they say they have votes to override a veto. Now, the thing that bothered me was not that bill, but the other bill that got vetoed, because the other bill related to net metering.
Oh.
And, the bill was to increase the size of projects that could be net metered by a factor of 5, which would bring them up to 7.5 megawatts from 1.5.
Wow.
And the veto on that, I would hope that would be overridden too. But we will see what happens.
Maybe next week we'll have an update.
Maybe we will.
I'm not sure if they're in session.
I believe they are. We have an item from the U.S. News and World Report.
And a visual.
This is, I think, an important story.
Yes. The life-saving benefits of offshore wind power.
Now, this is written by the person who wrote this article. As an environmental health and climate research, I am intrigued by how offshore wind power may improve public health. Replacing fossil fuels with wind and solar energy, research shows, can reduce risks of asthma, hospitalizations, and heart attacks. In turn, that can save lives. Actually, I've seen articles on this subject before. One of them that came up a couple of years ago was a calculation. I'm thinking that it was done by the World Health Organization, but I don't remember for sure. A calculation on the health costs that had been reduced because we were using wind power in the United States. And that was onshore wind. And it ran into many billions of dollars that just disappeared. And there, of course, the reason is because every year, according to the World Health Organization, 200,000 Americans die because of air pollution. And most of that air pollution is coming from fossil fuels. And if you put up wind power, you're reducing the amount of fossil fuels. So you're reducing the amount of air pollution. You are reducing the amount of hospital visits because of air pollution, diseases because of air pollution, deaths because of air pollution. And as we said earlier, there just is no excuse not to do that anymore.
No, there's not. I was curious that heart attacks are attributed to air pollution. I think of things, I don't have a medical background, but I think of the obvious things, respiratory diseases and cancer.
Yes, they're both big problems.
But I was thinking about the effect of air pollution on the heart, and
well,
of course, all of our organs are impacted, but
Yeah, and anytime you start in producing respiratory distress, you're putting strain on the heart.
that's true.
I had a friend when I was young, and by young I mean 21, 22, 23 years old, and at that time he was,
A baby.
well, he was 50 years older than I was. And he was retired, and he was a toxicologist, and he had a doctorate in pharmaceutical chemistry, but he had a very impressive background. He had been at one time the head of product safety at Colgate-Palmolive. And he told me that he believed, and he wished that he were young so he could get the money to do the research kind of thing, but he believed that the cost in lives of, the cost in medical problems from fossil fuels came to, in lives, about 450,000 people per year in the United States. Wow. And that most of this was because of cancer. Mm. And it was not just the products of emission that people were exposed to, it was the products themselves. And it was the off-gassing of gasoline, the off-gassing of plastics, the benzene, you just go down this great long list of things that we know are carcinogenic.
Yeah, benzene's bad news.
But it smells so good.
Oh,
Have you ever
my
known
goodness.
anybody who, when they got into a gas station, would like to smell the gasoline? Very destructive, but there are people who did that. You're stunned.
They like the smell.
They like the smell of gasoline, yes. Okay,
Well,
should we escape that?
Sure.
Okay, our last item here is from Renews.
Yes, it was a short news week on Wednesday.
It was a short news
A short
week?
news day on Wednesday.
Well, I think, the thing that we just talked about from U.S. News and World Report is worth looking at.
Yes.
Because it does say something, and he's talking about offshore wind. Fact of the matter is, onshore wind too. I mentioned that I've put up over 27,000 news items.
Yes.
I had to look at about 30 headlines for each of those. And every time I see a headline that relates to wind power and human health, wind power and property values, wind power and birds, anything like that, I always look into it. Mm. And unless it comes from Breitbart. Because Breitbart is always wrong. I mean, I at one time I went into Breitbart and a bunch of other places to see why were they differing from everybody else.
Right.
And I found, they would quote information that came from the US DOE, but it was 5 years old.
Oh. And trying to
project it as though it were current. I just saw an article in the American Thinker this last week that talked about how wind power and solar power were so expensive because they cost $70 per megawatt hour. And guess what?
10 years old?
Yeah, it was like, maybe not 10, but it was,
stale.
Right now, really stale. I mean, it's down around $20 per megawatt hour now.
Say.
And what's
Come here, little doggy. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. This is Ferris.
I still have Farah, if anyone
Farah, I'm sorry.
wants to meet her.
I'm going to do this so that anybody who wants to can see you holding Farah. There you go. I've stolen the mouse from Laurie. We've got one more item. We should do it. Demo. Yes. It's
Denmark demo opens cost-cutting doors.
Cost reductions of up to 30% have been realized on elements of the 28 megawatt Nissum Bredning offshore wind farm demonstration product off the coast of Jutland in Denmark, according to Siemens Gamesa. The project showcases several different engineering innovations that reduce the costs of installation and the efficiency of electricity transmission. And what they're saying, offshore wind is already going into Europe without any subsidy. All right? The only thing that you can say about this that detracts from that is that it's going in because the state has said we need offshore wind and let's get bids on this, but the bids are coming in that say we don't need a subsidy anymore. And now what's happening is they're saying they can reduce the price by 30%, which means all of a sudden it's coming in lower than the price of electricity for natural gas, coal, and nuclear. So how are you going to argue against that? Well, there are people who are going to make that their job.
Right.
Okay, anybody want to say hello to Farah? They can call Laurie. But in the meantime, we have to go, I'm sorry to say. So,
Farewell.
farewell. Hope you tune in next week.